Invited. I'm Megan Phillips.
And I'm Nathan Burkhart.
And we're your hosts. We're where we come together and we talk about, collaboration over division. Today, we're going to dive in and kind of talk about how Nate and I have worked together to kind of reframe and restructure and kind of challenge the stigma that sometimes comes along with divorce.
Well, first, let's talk about the kids' homework.
The kids' homework.
The kids' homework.
Yes,
and so,
that's right. Okay,
so we have a fourth grader or not fourth grader.
He's not
Well,
fourth
not
grade.
yet.
I'm
Second
glad.
grader and a first grader, and they're starting to have homework come in. So, and I don't know. I mean, I have to do the homework with them to a degree. So, one of the things that as we go through all of this new co-parenting and learning, it's figuring out what are the structures and what are the things you put in place to make sure they actually get the homework done.
Right.
I'll say, and this is just my opinion, I don't think that school is 100% set up for a single parent style of living
Or co-parenting style. Yeah,
right. It's intended for it to be single family household,
Like a nuclear
situation where the kid goes home and their stuff is in the same spot every single day, and they don't have to like move stuff from this place to this place. So,
and when it comes to like flyers,
yeah. So we run into this a lot. For example, like communication. A flyer comes home.
this was last year a lot. I think we've done pretty good, but
yeah,
let's talk about
but
it.
it was like one of the major hiccups we had. Like a flyer would come home and it'd be like one of the 80,000 celebratory days they have before the end of the year or before Christmas. And it's like back in the day there was like one, and now there's like 20. It's like, yeah, dress up like the character in Elf
Your favorite
Day.
Dr. Seuss character, and you're like,
Yeah, and I'm like, okay, here we go.
this takes pre-planning.
But what ends up happening is either the flyer ends up at somebody's house and the other person didn't know, who actually was in charge of getting them to school that next day.
Yep.
And then you find out, whoops, that kiddo didn't do Dr. Seuss Day. And so, because they come home very upset that they weren't in Dr. Seuss Day. And I was like, I didn't even know it was Dr. Seuss Day. And it was like, they've got apps and stuff they can do it. But, when sometimes you're irresponsible and forget to do stuff, it can get tough. But this happens with homework too, right? And they've got a project that comes home for school that is like a project. It's
like a week-long project.
Yeah.
A second grader.
Yeah. The other parent needs to know what's going on because they don't live at one spot the entire time. So I think one of the frustrations that we would have going through, and we still have this, it's like they get reading assignments or they have to read X amount of minutes. And I always get really upset because I'm like spending all this time reading with them and I'm signing off on this sheet. And then I pull it out and it's only my initials on it. And so I call up Megan. I was like, where are your initials? Is he not reading over there? How is he supposed to hit his reading goal if he's only reading half the time?
And I'm like, hey, one of the nights Lottie has ballet, so I'm busy taking them to ballet. And by the time we get home and eat dinner, it's bedtime. So we're not doing reading that night. And then and so I'm throwing out like why I'm not doing reading. And I'm like, don't you think they should have a little bit of a downtime? And so like we have different opinions, and then
it's a lot, isn't it, Megan?
Yeah. It can be a lot.
But what and so this is a challenge, and we don't have the right answer to it yet. I think as we continue to go through it, I think the thing that we're learning to figure out is to use my mom and dad more. Is my mom and dad pick them up from school half the time, and I pick them up the other half. And so having a person that can help fill in for those extra days and the extra time when it's available, that's great. Being able to use the resources that the school actually has, like they got this Dojo app that you can pop in and actually making sure that both people are reading it.
Yep.
But also giving the other parent grace and understanding that they're not always going to see every single thing.
Right.
Yeah. For example, Megan saw that conferences had popped up the other day. I had no idea. when you have an email box that literally has become a junk email because of every little subscription you signed up for over the last 80 years. Not 80.
Yeah, 80.
I've doubled my age.
Yeah.
And so
You feel that old now?
But I mean, I open up my inbox and it's trash, and I don't even see these sign up genius things. So, but having the other person that can pick up the slack and make sure that they understand the accountability happens on both ends. There's a lot of situations where, fortunately, you see this. I feel like with the guy more than the woman. Was like, for some reason, a guy feels like he can just walk away and not be part of that part of their kid's life. I'm not saying it doesn't go the other way around, but it feels like a lot of times the mom is always the one that's like kind of picking that up. But understanding you both have a role in understanding where they're at in school.
Yep.
You both have a role in helping make sure that their homework gets done.
That field trip permission slips get in.
Yeah.
That they get yearbooks.
Yeah, we forgot yearbooks, and normal
Last
people
year.
forget. Not we're not normal, but like normal people, you forget that too sometimes. But like, it's tough because it's
just
like
harder to organize. It
you
really
sit there and
is.
you're like, did you pay for the yearbooks? Why don't they have yearbooks? And I think I call up. I was super defensive about it. And it's like, why didn't they get yearbooks, Meg? Did you not pay for the yearbooks?
And I said I never got a slip about yearbooks. I didn't even think about yearbooks because nothing came home
and
about yearbooks.
I don't think I ever told you, but it was at my house.
I knew it was at your house. You didn't have to tell me because that happened with Dilly Bar Day. That happened with like all these other days that the kids are like,
let's roll out the list.
Do you remember when I even told Nate, because I didn't want to throw Nate under the bus to the kids, but I said, okay, sometimes it's really hard for dad to keep those papers organized. He's very busy. And I wanted to be like, so am I. But I was like, he's a very busy man. If you get a permission slip or a slip about an event coming up, can you keep it in the folder and give it to mommy? And they were like, yeah. And then I called Nate and told him that's what I said. And Nate was like, yeah, we'll keep it in the folder to go to mommy.
In all fairness, every day I get every drawing that they've ever created.
That's not true.
Home.
I have so many drawings. They actually do it every day.
So, so for a normal nuclear family like household, I wonder how many pieces of paper comes home from school of this is the little picture that they drew.
It's every day. Their folders are full. I am throwing away my children's art. But I'm keeping other ones.
I would never throw away my child's art.
Which is why I go to his house and help him clean up and throw away the children's art. Yeah. Listen, it's every day. Come on, there's a Bluey episode. Bring it. Recycle the paper.
Yeah. I just throw it away. You can't control what I do at my house. I'm a person that throws away paper. She recycles. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah,
I love the environment, and so
I love the environment too. No, so we are working to collaborate on school. So that is the 10-minute of what's going on with our children, with us, and a co-parent situation.
And we'll figure out school. I mean, we've never been parents to
humans before,
and not at this point, so this is some learning on the side. It's just a little bit more difficult when it's kids coming from, they live half the time with their mom and half the time with their dad.
It's about, again, establishing communication. And I think we did talk about how you were like, yeah, actually I was like, just leave those in their folder. Don't even take them out and put them in the piles that I see at your house. Just leave them in the folder because they'll get to me. And he's like, okay, I think you've done that.
I think the thing that's most important in all this is like, if you're frustrated by something, call up the other person. This isn't like a passive aggressive email or text. I don't know. I feel like in today's world, it's so easy to text somebody and be like, what happened here and blah, blah, blah. They can't read tone. You can't read anything. Sometimes it's easier to call somebody up and be like, hey, look, this is a feeling and a concern that I had. Like, is there any way we can figure this out and fix it?
Yep.
So we can make it better.
So our topic today, we said, is about let's talk about terminology first.
Okay.
So, and how Nathan and I are communicating and kind of trying to change. We already collaborated at the beginning and talked about making sure the tone we have about each other when we're talking about each other to our children is never a tone of putting the other one down. But I think that, I'm a speech language pathologist. I love semantics. I love vocabulary. I love specificity when it comes to titles and names and things like that. And I was challenged by my own dad. He was reading something that we were putting together, some publicity or just some stuff for this particular podcast. And he was like, "You're using X." And he's like, "I'm wondering what would happen if you changed that to former." So what do you think, Nate?
Well, it was interesting, and I still say X a lot by mistake because it's very common. But
Right.
yeah, words matter. Words have feelings associated with them, and the word X means like it's like completely kaput, no more.
It feels terminated.
It feels negative, right?
Right.
And so because it is, and when you look at this, when you think about the idea of actually rebranding this as not an ex-girlfriend or ex-wife, but more as this is my former spouse, my former wife,
Yep.
or my co-parent, or just Meg,
Right.
or the parent.
But when people need
Meg's my
context.
kid's mom.
Right.
I think that there's a lot more positive context with how that is. When immediately I hear X, you think about the breakup. That's what I think about.
Right.
I think about, so like what happened, what went wrong, why, like who is bad to who. But if you're like former spouse or former wife or co-parent,
Right.
it means that this person still has value. They had an old title,
Yeah.
just isn't there anymore.
Right. And I think it provides context because a lot of times when I'm talking to people, like especially like people that I know and that know the situation, when I'm like Nate, I don't need to give any. But when there's like an introduction there or something, I'm like, well, this is my former spouse and friend and current co-parent. This is Nate. Like,
Yeah.
and then from then on, I'm able to. But it is. I think it actually gives the listener a little clue too, because historically, using the word X in movies, in plays, in poems, like it's negative.
Right.
And it can be negative. And like, let's try to turn that around a little bit.
Yeah, and what's interesting is I've just started doing this more over the last like couple weeks, ever since you talked to me about it. And what I
talked to him about it.
What I learned, it's like the people who actually like really care a lot about you, they'll adjust to your terminology,
Yep.
right? And
Absolutely.
so there was this person I was out with the other day, and like immediately they just started saying Meg. In the beginning, it was like, oh yeah, your ex-wife, but then they just heard me say Meg, opposed to saying my ex-wife, and they completely adopted the terminology
Right.
and changed it into Meg, or my kid's mom,
Yeah.
and I make it very clear to anyone that I'm out. I'm still really good friends with Megan. It's
Right.
not like we're not friends. So they adjust to it really fast. What I like though is what that tells me is that if an adult can understand that and make that switch, your kids hear it different too.
Right.
Right. And so, because if someone's around who's like, oh, this is my ex-wife, Megan,
Right.
I wonder, I don't know, but I wonder if kids adjust better when they're like, this is Holden and Lonnie's mom, Megan,
Right.
opposed to this designation reflects a time of a lot of hurt and pain that they witness. I mean, kids see a lot that we don't know. I mean, Holden and Lottie saw a lot more and went through
And still probably
so
do
much.
once in a while.
Yeah.
And still navigate that.
Right. But the thing is, it's like at this point, it's such a more positive way to talk about the other parent in front of the kid.
Right. Well, like we just, again, this is the type of thing that we keep exploring is what is going to help the mental health of our kids. When we first got a divorce, I mean, I think we got them into therapy starting that. I mean, it takes a while. Gosh, I think people know how long it takes to get mental health appointments and things like that. But once we were able to navigate that, I think the divorce was finalized April 2023, and they were in therapy by May. I got them in. I communicated with you, and they were in therapy.
Yep.
And Nate and I had already talked about, and we had already made the switch, not so much with terminology, but with being like, okay, we're not going to paint the other one negative around each other. We also started talking and collaborating about what to do during holidays.
Mm-hmm.
So even from the moment we separated.
That was the biggest concern for me, was not being able to see him every Christmas and Thanksgiving. You know, the fact that I thought that one day was going to have to shift. But again, one of the common themes that you'll hear about in this podcast are boundaries and what you deem is appropriate and not. You know, I've had so many people have said to me over time, that's not appropriate. But, you know, that might not be appropriate to them. But whatever's appropriate to us and whatever's best for our kids is what's appropriate.
So, for example, to provide context, we still prioritize spending holidays together in an appropriate way, right?
Yeah.
So if it is Nate's day for Christmas, I'm still welcome to come and celebrate that holiday with you guys.
Mm-hmm.
To be around the kids and experience like present opening, or vice versa. If it's my day, you know, he's able to partake in that if he so chooses. And I think we did that with Easter and all kinds of things like that, right? And you know, we've received feedback before that it's just not like it.
Well, it's just it breaks the status quo, right? It's
right.
like you'll have some people that are like, well, that's the only day I get to see my dad, you know, but usually I don't see my dad any other time of the year. Or they might be like, oh, well, this year I'm doing Thanksgiving with my mom and Christmas with my dad. But with us, there's an opportunity to see them on both days.
Mm-hmm.
And if there was like, there's been days where you've taken them to your sister's house in Kansas for Thanksgiving, and I wasn't going to have them there. I had the opportunity not only to FaceTime with them, but I had ample opportunity to set up the Burkhart Thanksgiving on a different day.
Yeah.
And so our kids could participate in that with me. So
and
I didn't feel
cousins,
completely
so
lost.
That, you know, because we just have communication about trying to make sure that, you know, because it is hard to be on a holiday when it's not your day and just be alone.
Right.
I mean, there's pain there. There's
well, especially in the beginning, right? And so I remember the first holiday. It was actually triggering. I'll say it was actually triggering the first Easter that we had.
Yeah.
Where I think I looked at you and I was like, hey, it was like after church, I was like, I need to go home and just be with myself. It was a day I didn't have them because it was triggering because I had my entire family together. Right. And I had a lot of negative things coming up because I thought we were like very much playing house, you know? And so, and to me, that was an issue that I didn't want to do anymore. And I had to step away from it.
Right.
You know, so it goes both ways.
Right. But it's what you're comfortable with. And it's that communication, because we've created a space where Nate could tell me, you know what, mentally, I need to go home.
Yeah. Well, and I felt safe. I could say that without being judged.
And
right?
he had already spent some time with, you know, the kids. And it wasn't like I turned around and was like, no, you're going to stay. You know, like, you know, I think he felt honored when I said, yep, go, you know. No,
I felt supported. I felt like that my feelings were heard, right? For me, it was always, yeah, I got that point. I got what I needed. I saw them, you know, look for Easter baskets and get the opportunity to go to church. But then after that, it was like, part
of you hurt.
Yeah, it did. And I wasn't ready for that. Right. And so it was time to not do that anymore. And I think what you can do is listen to the other person and not like hear what they say and not think that you're being a bad parent for not being there that whole time too. So it's tough. I know I feel like I'm being a hypocrite in a way because I'm like saying you get a chance to be there the entire time, but then ultimately you're like, yeah, but then if you don't want to be there, you don't have to be there.
You're not a hypocrite. What we're saying is that if we offer each other flexibility, then we feel like we have the opportunity to be there when we need to be there and take a step back when it hurts to heal.
Sure.
The flexibility is what we're advocating for.
No, that's good. I like that.
right?
Yeah,
That's
I like
not,
that.
yeah, that wasn't hypocritical to me. So I think that talking about all of this, going back to the fact that we prioritized getting our kids into therapy, because we prioritize getting ourselves into therapy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And getting our kids into therapy, I think us caring about the terminology, us caring about how we talk about each other when we're not around to our kids. I think we can see some fascinating things happen. So Holden and Lottie started therapy, and pretty fast, after a couple of sessions, the therapist came out and said, I'm actually trying to figure out what to do here, because when you told me that you're bringing them in to make sure that, because you're navigating a divorce, she goes, I was expecting all the typical things that you would talk to a kid about, like, are your parents talking bad about each other, and how to handle that, things you can say to advocate for yourself, and, big emotions that are coming when they're fighting, or that kind of stuff. She's like, that she came out and she's like, that doesn't really seem to apply here. And I'm getting questions that I'm going to have to look up research and answers for that are different. And
Right.
those questions were, Holden would say, my mom and dad are still really good friends. I don't know why we're not in the same house anymore.
Right.
And she's like, well, what do I do with this?
Yeah.
Because his questions were different.
Yeah.
His questions were...
And at that point, we didn't talk to them about why we got divorced, right?
Right.
We didn't have that conversation.
Because we were trying to figure out and navigate the words to use.
Right.
Right? That... And we have since definitely talked to them about that. But... their questions, I guess, were just much, and Lottie when it happened was 4, right? So Lottie was in, like, didn't have a lot of those questions. Like, she was just like, I miss our pool.
Yeah, right. But, like, ultimately, I think what you're going for here is that the therapist noticed that there was a difference in how the parents treated each other, and that they actually are listening to what you're saying about them. So it's like, it's very easy when you've got your kid there to be like, well, your mom does this, your mom does that. But when you, like, meet your friends, or you're starting to have conversations with other people on the side and they're around still, and you're like, yeah, my ex-wife does blah, blah, blah. My ex-wife is this. My ex-wife does that. They actually are still listening.
Absolutely.
And I think that we forget that sometimes, right? And the way that these two have responded, it's consistent across the board, where not only do they hear respectful names when we're there, but they also hear us refer to them as their parent, or
right.
Megan.
And just making sure, that we aren't putting the other one down. I think the absence of that is incredibly healthy for them.
Sure. So let me ask you this. In your head, like, when I call you my ex-wife, how do you feel?
I don't like it. Well, it's not that I don't, it just feels like damaged. If you say, this is who I co-parent with, this is my former wife, my former spouse, I feel like...
it feels like I did something wrong. I feel like this is my ex-husband.
Yeah.
I'm like, woof. I was like, yep, there's the guy that did blah, blah, blah. And I feel like that in today's world, you're like, there's the ex-husband. Oh, boy. He must have cheated on her. He must have abused her in some way. He must have a problem. Like, that's the way I feel. That's not, I'm not saying that's what goes through everybody's head. There's a lot of insecurity that makes it feel that way.
But it feels like I was on the chopping block, or that there was a reason you were on the chopping block. Yeah. And it's like, there's so much
So if that's
more.
the way, like, we feel, I mean, how do you know how your kids feel by hearing that's my ex-wife, Megan? And they're like, I don't know. And it's just like, to me, it doesn't feel good to us, maybe because we're hyper personalized it. But like, the thing is with them, it doesn't feel great.
There's got to be a difference in their head than if
Yeah.
I'm like, this is my ex-husband, Nate. Or if I'm like, hey, this is my former spouse. This is my kid's dad, Nate.
Yeah.
And my kids hear it and they're like,
I think,
yes, he's my
I
dad.
think I love kids' dad the best.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe that's
But
because
don't call me that though.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't. I would say, but like this is my kid's mom, or
Right.
It's like, because I love being a dad and I love being associated in that way, right?
Right. But I also feel like the former spouse part is important sometimes for context, because just being like, this is the kid's mom, Meg.
Oh, sure.
Then they don't know that
we
we're
didn't
not
have our
married
kids from
anymore,
like,
yeah.
just doing X, Y, and Z, hooking
Yeah.
up and
Yeah.
stuff. It's just like, that's okay if that happened to you, but I mean, it's just like, I'm not judging at all.
Yes.
But like, ultimately here, it's like there's a lot of assumptions that get made regardless of
Yeah, we
what
were
you're
married,
saying.
now we're not.
Yeah,
And the former spouse gives that context
Sure.
in the initial moment.
sure.
For those that already know it, are like, oh yeah, this is my kid's dad.
You don't have to go into like, this is Megan, and then explaining to someone down the road where like, I'm confused, and be like, oh, we used to be married. It's
Right.
like, yeah, this is my former spouse or my former wife, Megan.
Right.
I think former does have a lot more positive connotation than ex. I agree with you completely. And
Yeah.
it's interesting though, because I still, like I said, say ex a lot because I'm just so used to it.
Right.
It's like, oh, that's my ex-girlfriend, that's my ex-wife, that's my blah, 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 and even when I'm talking about someone that I've broken up with and I say my ex-girlfriend, I don't love saying that. It immediately makes it feel like that there was this like, really, someone did someone dirty
Right.
on the back end.
Yep.
And sometimes they did, but like the thing is, I think that everybody deserves an opportunity in order to be able to provide their perspective on something.
Right.
When two people break up, even if they were just dating, there's always two sides to what happened.
Right.
It's like somebody did X, Y, and Z, and they say, well, I did that because I wasn't fulfilled here. Or someone's like, that person did this to me, but they're not taking into accountability what, how they were feeling and how they got to the point where they were so far removed from each other.
Right. It's about using language to paint an accurate picture of our situation. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to use just neutral or loving terminology, because I think that will paint a picture of a newcomer in the situation immediately. They will notice you didn't say X because
Yeah.
it's so typical to
Well,
say
and
it.
the thing is, when I start getting into like the dating world and stuff like this, the number one thing I always like am scared about is like ripping on ex-girlfriends or ex-wives. Like, I've been married 20 times.
All the
You
wives.
just look me up. You can
We have a
search me.
support group
Yeah.
over here.
These are the wives of Nathan that no longer are. And so, but like, the thing is like, the number one thing I go into a date with is like, I am not going to rail on the other person.
Right.
that like, I'm not going to like get into this thing being like, they did blah, they're crazy. Oh my goodness. Like, stay away. They're a psycho. Like, to me, that's a big red flag. Right. And, even when I'm like, oh yeah, that's my ex-wife, I like, to a degree, I feel like I'm insinuating that it ended bad.
Right.
I mean, I guess it didn't end good.
I know, not a
mean,
divorce.
something happened where it had to end. But at the same time, I like that because to me, being able to go in there and demonstrate to somebody when you're on like a first or second date with them that you've got the ability to still see value in people that you've broken up with.
Yep.
And that you've got the ability to understand that that person still is the parent of your kid, and that kid's going to want to spend lots of time with them and love them.
Yep.
Like, we always talk about this too. If like we ever would get married one day, or even like be in just a long-term committed relationship, our role is not to step in as the father or the mother figure, like for somebody else that has got kids. Nor would we want that person to step in and be another mom, or I guess another mom to our kids. Yeah. And so,
Just funny story is Holden, when he started realizing we might be dating, he was like, you know, or Nate was dating or something like that. And he was like, I don't want another mom. And in my head, I'm like, that's all you're ever getting, buddy.
Yeah, just lots of moms.
Just lots of moms.
Yeah, you just get lots of moms.
But really, no, actually on dating apps, I have something specific on there that says I am looking for a partner for me. I am not looking for someone to co-parent with because I already have someone who I'm co-parenting with. My kids already have parents. That's not the role I'm expecting anyone to walk in and be.
Yeah.
Because Holden has a mom. Holden and Lottie too. Yeah, she has one too. Lottie and Holden have a mom and a dad.
Right.
I'm looking for you to be a good role model, someone that will respect them and they'll respect you.
Yeah.
But other than that, and may take on some sort of a parental feeling.
No,
of a
and
role.
this is here's an example about how words matter. This is something that actually came in, right? So it's very common, at least that I've heard some people saying, like, instead of saying like your stepdad or your stepmom, this is my bonus dad or my bonus mom, or like, okay, so that's a good example of how positive words matter, right? Instead of being like, this is my stepdad, which makes me feel as a stepdad that, like, okay, I'm like the one that was jackknifed into this relationship. I don't deserve any respect at all because I'm just there.
Yeah.
I am somebody that really just came into their life and they don't care about me.
Right.
That's the way that terminology made me feel. But like hearing bonus dad, that gets me excited. I'm like, oh, I can be their friend.
I'm extra.
It's my job to listen to their mom and make sure that their mom feels respected and you're supporting their mom in the rules and the boundaries that they're setting for their own kid. It's not your job to come in there and change the rules and the laws of the land because I'm the man. I need to go in there and make sure that like my presence and like is felt among this whole family. No, that's not respectful to the family that they've built. And that person has a dad.
Yeah.
It's not me.
Yeah.
But I can be the bonus dad.
Yeah.
The bonus dad sounds so much more fun than stepdad.
Yep.
So I'm using that as an analogy or an example about changing, like how changing these terms can actually provide a positive influence.
Yep. I absolutely agree. So yeah, that's kind of how we're turning the tables when it comes to a couple of stigmas that are surrounded with divorces. One of them is just change that language.
And we'll continue to play around with it, you know, and it's just like, but is there a different word than X? You know, is there a different word than it, like that shows the type of respect that you want to still have?
Right.
Because again, this is somebody that you had kids with.
Right.
Right. This is somebody that at some point you're like, this person can be a really, really great person to be in my life. And like,
yes, it's about creating a flexible, healthy narrative that challenges the stigma that could come along with the what I'd call the more antiquated terms.
Yeah, interesting. I like it. It'll take some adjustment, but I like it a lot.
Yep.
So,
all right. Do we have any questions from the producer?
Has there been a time where you are talking to the kids and you find yourself correcting what they say? Like, oh, no, that's, about divorce or about each other, or even not the kids. Like, is there times where you are correcting people in their language that they're using about your spouse or your divorce?
Yeah, I haven't ever had to correct them.
No.
Because a lot of them just say her name. And I think it's established through me though. It's like, anyone who actually knows and cares about me knows that, like, I really don't want to get into a huge discussion that talks bad about their mom, So Meg deserves respect in the same way that I would expect it on the other end. Now, everyone frustrates somebody at some point, right? And so it's just like when I have a person one day and I get frustrated, I'm going to come and bring concerns to them and want to talk to them about things that happen. That will include frustrations with Megan when that happen. And so, but like, I think with our kids and with our friends, I don't ever have anyone come up to me and say your ex-wife. The only time it's ever said is out of my mouth. You know, even when we were being interviewed on the radio the other day, I never heard ex-wife come out of the interviewee's mouth once. It's all coming from us, you know, and it's to the kids, it's just mom and dad. But, you know, they will come in, and divorce, unfortunately, has become a more commonplace thing. And they have friends that are divorced, and so it's normalized it a little bit. Friends who have
parents who are divorced.
Yeah. There you go. Friends who have parents that are divorced. But we also know that there might become a time down the road where will say that anyone that's divorced is from a broken home. Let's use that as an example. And I would challenge that terminology. If someone said we are from a broken home, we are not from a broken home. We are from a home that teaches love and acceptance. And we're not broken because we're still working on it. It's just a different looking home.
We're still a unit. And that's, oh my gosh, I'm glad you said that, because Lottie did some art recently. And it was incredibly special to me because she was supposed to draw her family. And she did draw a picture, and she put us all in the same picture. She didn't draw two different pictures, which could sometimes, I think, be typical. She did draw Nate on one side, or we were like the bookends, okay? And in the middle was her and Holden. And it meant the world to me because when she thinks of her family, she still sees us as a unit, a family unit. She does not, because a lot of kids will draw the parents next to each other holding hands or whatever, right? She bookended us. But to her, the central part of her family unit is what you and I always want Holden and Lottie to believe and know and feel is them. They're our central unit. And she drew it this way, and
That's interesting, because we're actually looking now at a family unit being about raising the kids,
right?
Which is what our central thing is. For a couple that doesn't have kids, it might be very different.
Right.
Or a couple that, you know, have dreams and they want to travel the world together, it's going to be different. For us, what I'm hearing and what I really like, it's like for our portion of the family, Holden and Lottie is the center of it all.
Right.
You know, because that's what it is. And they recognize that. To them, we are their family. You
Not
know?
in a spoiled, they get everything way.
No.
In a, we are doing this and we love, and you are this.
Well, and eventually they'll have other people that are part of their family too, and they'll recognize that, and it should grow. But right now, that is it. And who's to tell them that they don't have that? You know? If there's anyone out there that's like, well, that's not your family because of X, I say X, Y, and Z a lot. Well, that's not your family because your family is who you go home to every single day. That's just not true. Right. You know? I'd consider so many friends as part of my family unit, if I were to say it like the truth.
Yeah. And, you know, I was just thinking about it and something popped up. There are times that I do stop Holden. Lottie doesn't do this yet. Holden will say something like, and I think I'm curious, I bet he does this to you too. I actually haven't asked, but he will say something like, when Dad gets mad, he yells, and he yells and it really upsets me, and you don't yell as much. Now, this is usually like the day after he got in trouble for something, right? And in my head, I'm like, ooh, no, I have my yelling moments and I know it, right? Mm-hmm. So I have to immediately stop and say, hey, like, let's talk about what happened. And let's talk about language you can use with Dad if you don't like, you know, this and that. And it's like, but mommy loses her temper too sometimes, doesn't she? And he's usually like, yeah. And I was like, maybe you're just really mad at dad right now. So you're trying to make me look perfect, but I'm not perfect, am I? No. I remember when I messed up and yelled and screamed this other day. He's like, yeah. And like, it's like, I want to stop the negative talk there because I think he's trying to use it to his advantage in a certain moment.
I've apologized to my kids about how I've talked to Megan before. And so I especially when the divorce was fresh or back in the day, I'd say, well, that's just your mom's decision and she doesn't love you in the same capacity that I do. It was something along those lines, which is extremely hurtful and wrong, right? And so, but then sitting there and saying like, I should never have said that about your mom. I am sorry that I lost my cool there. And that was like, that when you hear that from me, that's something that shouldn't happen. And you need to know that's wrong.
Yeah, I think there was a point when Holden was calling me cruel and saying like, you don't love me. I hate you. And it's because I said no to a play date.
Yeah.
And his words, an 8-year-old, I needed to like reframe him, but I was long day at work. I was frustrated. He was hurting my grown-up feelings. And he's like, you're not going to let me, and I hate you, and you're awful. You're the worst mom in the world. And I turned around one day and I was like, how many play dates do you get with your friends at your dad's house?
Oh, yeah.
And he stopped and he goes, none. And then I went, uh-oh, that was naughty of me. And I too said, you know what? I messed up, Holden. I'm able to do these play dates because our days are different and my work schedule is different.
That's right.
And I apologized. I said, your dad would be happy to set up play dates and has set up play dates for you. And I'm sure if you ask him, he will do that. Just make sure you let him know it's important to you. But I had to apologize and take the foot out of my mouth.
Yeah.
You know?
You see how we mess up? I mean, we all do, right? It's like any person that's out there pretending like they don't ever say things that hurt people, they're just lying.
Right.
I mean, like that's my perspective.
We mess up.
We all screw up. And if you can't see your mistakes, that's where you're messing up.
And you know what was so interesting about that moment is I didn't even want to hurt you. Like there was no like
I
got hurt by an 8-year-old's feelings.
Well, it comes from a place of feeling insecure, right? And so it's
and I'm like I am a good mom.
They hurt my feelings, so I'm going to make sure you understand how important I actually am.
Right. And to do that, I used you, and I was like, I messed up.
I feel like a superhuman thing to do, right? And it's like anyone that knows me really, really well knows that if you come in and I feel like attacked, like I immediately will start like, I'll regress. I'll be like, well, you know, I've never heard you say that before until right now, or I'll say things that are just dismissive of feelings, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not that I'm intending to. It's like straight up things that I'm trying to defend myself because I'm feeling attacked, even when someone's just trying to give me feedback.
I just yell at them.
No.
You retreat, and sometimes I get louder.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah. I mean,
it wasn't always helpful.
I think that we all mess up sometimes, and there's nothing wrong with saying you're sorry to your kid.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge. Like, you could just go into any parenting podcast, and you're going to hear them talk about like repair is everything.
I think one of
acknowledgement
the issues,
and repair.
Yeah, I think one of the issues that we have in today's world is we don't apologize to each other enough,
and we need to apologize to kids if we are. Yeah. We are raising...
Well, they learn, right? So if they never hear apologies from you, what makes you think
that they're
ever going to take accountability and apologize for things in the future?
Right. And so if they see that mom and dad can like take the foot out of their mouth, acknowledge and say, I have messed up. You know, kind of like saying like, I'm sorry, Nate. Communicative is a word.
Yeah.
You just need to be more communicative with your children.
Yeah. All right. So that's going to pretty much wrap up today's episode. We're going to have another one coming up soon. We're going to get into the wins and challenges of collaborative co-parenting, which is something that we very much believe in.
Yep.
We're also going to have an episode coming up talking about boundaries, which is a very hot word that people are using a lot right now.
But how do we use it? How is it important to us? How do we define it? And how is it helping us as we navigate this life after divorce?
Yeah. We do want to make sure that if you like today's podcast, even if you don't, please just give us a 5-star review. If you the algorithm, you'll do me a solid. But put comments down below if they're available to you. Follow us on social at Divorce Not Divided Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. Again, new episodes drop every Monday at 7 a.m. Central, and you can find them wherever podcasts are available to you. Whether you want to watch us on YouTube and see what we actually look like in real life, or you want to just hear us on your drive to work or while you're doing the dishes, we're happy to be with you no matter what.
Yep. So you can catch us on YouTube if you want to see our gorgeous faces.
Yeah, just note.
But thank you always for your support. We really appreciate you guys as listeners, and we really do encourage that you engage with us. Send us questions. Send us your comments. We want to know what you have to say.
Yep. Thanks. We love you all.